Hi, guys, welcome to the 166th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, again, talking about something in the news the attack of the Hamas on Israel, and everybody's talking about it. And again, camps are forming between the pro Palestines, between the pro Israelis, and in the meantime, people are dying. And again, from the perspective of that I'm looking, which is always a meta perspective, always looking from a higher level, considering that humanity is one global organism, it's as if your liver was attacking your stomach, and cells die in the process, and then your stomach, sends, its troops into the liver and kills the liver. It's just silly, right? Because as a global organism, you're just suffering, and you have like these parts inside of you that are fighting, and so it's just sad at that level. But again, it's just a bit weighing in on okay, what do we do? How do we end war? How do we put an end to all of this? Now, obviously, there's a lot to say about putting an end to the illusion of separation, this whole cry for peace and unity and all that stuff. But beyond that, I wrote an article last year when Russia invaded Ukraine, because I was also frustrated about that one, which is called "Ending All Wars," and you can check the link in the description. And the rationale is basically that in order to put an end to all wars, we need to move past the nation state's centralized pyramidal structures of power kind of model. Because ultimately, if you look at who wages war, it's predominantly nation states. It's basically, if you've watched this channel, then you know that nation states represent a kind of daddy state, we say, to humanity or to a collective of humans. So it's as if humans represent children, and they create a paternal figure, which is the state, which makes decisions on their behalf, because as a collective, they're not mature enough to make decisions collectively without that kind of intermediation. And that kind of governance structure evolves as humanity grows. So, at some point, you're like this tribe of 100 humans, and you defer all of your freedom to the tribal chief and the shaman. You're just like one little disposable cog in a larger machine, which is the tribe. You forget yourself, and it's all to the benefit of the tribe. And that is this idea of the same relationship between a baby and its parents, the parents being ideally this kind of benevolent higher gods or entities that take care of the baby, and the baby's powerless and it's just there, and then, governance structures evolve, humanity grows, and then you're a 5-year-old kid, and that's typically the relationship between a 5-year-old kid and the parents is mirrored as the society to their king. So you see parents as kings and queens, and you can see that you're like them, but they also have all the power and you have none. And then humanity is an adolescent, and now your relationship to your parents is the same as citizens to representative democracies. You elect people to make decisions on your behalf, but your relationship to the government is the same as a relationship to a teenager to his parents. So you always criticize your government, you're always protesting and asking for more rights and questioning the legitimacy of their decisions. Are they really representing your best interest? But it's still a daddy, basically, that's making decisions on your behalf. And right now we're seeing a shift towards a decentralized governance and self-governance, where you no longer need the intermediation of these centralized kind of structures and entities like nation states and governments. And what does that do to war? So when you have these centralized governments, it's really, in a way, it's really beneficial for people to delegate responsibility. Well, I didn't want to go to war, but, daddy said we have to go to war, so we're going to war. It's this whole Romeo vs. Juliet story, where Romeo and Juliet are from two families that hate each other. The head of the families have all the power. They decide, like, the two heads of the mafia, basically. And regardless of whether members of their family actually love each other, respectively, like Romeo and Juliet, they are obliged to hate each other and to be at war with each other. And it's the same with two nations. Like, you can have people that are, I don't know, like maybe Jewish and Muslim or whatever, that love each other, But the respective daddies, even if Palestine doesn't technically have like a state, or isn't technically a state, or Hamas isn't a state, there's still this kind of pyramidal structure, just like in Romeo and Juliet, where you have this one central figure that makes the decisions, and then all the children inside that pyramidal structure are meant to follow the orders, not question them, follow them blindly, and obey, even if they don't want to do it, even if they're somehow morally opposed. And so even if like a person that is Jewish and a person that is Muslim want to love each other like Romeo and Juliet, well, they can't, because the daddies have decided that they have to hate each other. And so once the daddies sort of go away, then you can rekindle with a kind of fluidity where these identities of people, they can create, bridges between different identities that are unimpeded by these centralized structures that oppress people basically into behaving in a certain way. Because what happens when there is a war? Well, everybody is supposed to rally behind their daddy, pick up the arms and go and fight, and you're like a 20, 25-year-old kid, just shooting at people you don't even know. You don't even know why you're shooting at them, but you are. And so, yeah, it's just this tragedy of Romeo and Juliet. And what would change if nation states sort of went towards more self-governance? Well, most people would not go to war, like spontaneously, like people in the street, take up arms and then go fight against. No, I mean, most people, all they want is to live peaceful lives, take care of their families, contribute to society, have nice dinners, laugh with friends. It's only when they're pushed to like the real extreme that people will go to war spontaneously. Like during revolutions or things like that, But it really takes something really colossal for people to do that. And we've already sort of witnessed decentralized warring, even if it wasn't technically decentralized. Like, for instance, when the US invaded Vietnam, or when the USSR invaded Afghanistan, well, there was some amount of coordination. There was some amount of ideology also behind those kind of clashes. But there wasn't, there were some leaders there, but it wasn't like a nation state, because the state's infrastructures were destroyed or killed, or were under the control of the oppressor. Like, for instance, in Afghanistan, the USSR technically had the control of the administration and the government and everything. And the fighters were guerrilla-style fighters. They were fighting for a higher cause, which was their independence from the Soviet Union. And the same for Vietnam. I mean, like the people were like just about any Vietnamese person was fighting against an external kind of invader that is trying to impose a certain, political system upon them. When predominantly in the 60s, when the Vietnam War was waged, most people wanted communism in Vietnam, believe it or not. Like, if you do a vote, like a democratic vote, that actually most people would have voted for a communist side. And that's just the thing. Like, this is like pushing against the will of the people. And already back in the days, it was impossible for a nation state to conquer a people that decided to sort of, wage war against another nation state. How does that help us in ending all wars? Well, the first thing is, like I said, most people just want peace. And so most people won't go to war unless they're invaded or attacked. So it's more of a self-defense mechanism. Like Afghanistan, the tribal chiefs, once they've booted out the USSR, they didn't go about invading their neighbors. They did set up a nation state, though, which is the problem here. And the same for Vietnam. So a nation state was a structure that was important at some point to sort of grow humanity to a state where we no longer need them. And now is the time. And decentralization and these blockchain technologies, self-governance, and all these technologies that are emerging are also really interesting in terms of the logic behind war. When two countries are fighting, typically what the objective is not to post a soldier in front of everyone's front door and control citizens one by one individually. The aim is to take control over the centralized institutions that are in that country, to cut off the head, so to speak, and then the whole sort of pyramidal structure of power then trickles down into each individual. So typically that's how colonialism worked, like nobody replaced the entire social structure of a country and replaced it with their own soldiers, their own everything. Like if you look at how the UK or Great Britain took control of India, they didn't replace the entire power structure. They just took control over the existing head of the state, and then the Indian police was doing the bidding of the colonizer. And the same for Hitler when he invaded Europe. He didn't destroy the entire French administration. He didn't kill every single civil servant and police officer. He just made sure that he had control over the governments of those countries, and then the powers trickled down towards individuals. So centralized governments are basically, they have a target right on their head, right here, for invasion. In any invasion, that's the first target you're trying to do, is to seize the existing structures of power in order to take control of the entire country. But how do you do that once your structures are decentralized? Once your decision-making processes are decentralized, and where, imagine citizens that set up a sort of a mesh network between all of their devices that is interconnected, where every phone is at the same time a receiver and a transmitter, and they're all connected in this mesh network. They all work through cryptography, blockchain, taking decisions and coordinating in that manner. All of their money is sort of in that kind of shared cloud space, where you'd have to disable every single personal device in order to take control of, to disable their ability to organize. And there's no central bank. There's no head of state. They're all voting on their phones to decide what to do and coordinate. And in order to penetrate that network, you'd have to also there's plenty of obstacles for you to do that, because you'd have to acquire one of their phones, and then maybe, it's just there's just so much that technology has advanced now, where how would you take control of that kind of country? Like if you want to invade a country where you have 10 million people and all of them coordinate like that, and actually it's this structure that is built from the ground up, where basically, cities have their own little, self-contained kind of decentralized and self-governed system. And then those systems connect to other cities to form an even larger mesh and structure. And that, scales upwards. But it's not because you've disabled the top one that all the other ones are now subservient to you. You would actually have to colonize every single node and working your way upwards in order to take it. It's just, you can't do it. You can't do it. Like with force and military, you can't do it. Obviously, there are going to be new kinds of ways of trying to colonize people. And that's also why it's really important to also shift paradigms. So, right now it's more like this psyops and ideological warfare, where governments are trying to persuade you to, with their ideology, to do their bidding, even if there's not this pyramidal structure, because you are subservient to their ideology. You're going to do their bidding even when there isn't anyone with a gun to your back saying do this or do that. A kind of brainwashing. And that works so long as you're stuck in a sort of a certain paradigm. Like, for instance, if you're still stuck in monotheism, then you have competing systems there, like the Protestant version, the Catholic version, the Orthodox Church, and the newborn Christians, and all these different ones that are built on monotheism as a belief system. And then they're trying to compete with each other and trying to pool in one way or another, Jehovah Witnesses and all that stuff. If you switch to a materialist lens, like for instance, believing now in materialist science and God doesn't exist, then all of these and all of their arguments become irrelevant instantly. And you don't need to sort of persuade yourself and read the Bible and do all these efforts to be impervious to that kind of ideology. You've made a switch to another paradigm, and that has no bearing on you anymore. And this is the whole purpose of my channel, is to propose a kind of new way of looking at reality, of looking at the world, which makes you immune to any of these propagandas about trying to divide us between, the pros and the antis and all that stuff. looking at humanity as one global collective organism. What does that imply? What is this, pattern of how we developed and how to go forward? All of that, and obviously I invite you to look at the other videos and also read the article. But again, like, this is not the time to get yourself absorbed emotionally in all this stuff, even though it's very sad and there are many people dying. But to really make this shift in consciousness and looking at it from a higher perspective and saying, no, I'm not going to be drawn in this. And I know the priority now is to go above all of this and understand that we're meant to transition towards self-governance and show that it is possible to coordinate and make decisions collectively without these centralized institutions, which are at the core of the problem. Because they're not only the perpetrators, most wars are waged by nation states, but also they're the victims, which is when there is a war, who do you target? Typically, you're trying to target the state. So that's the first reason, the first objective when you're invading a country is to take control of that structure. Once it disappears, the motive for actually invading physically a country with tanks and all that stuff disappears as well. And now you're going to try to do it via other means, like, cyber warfare or whatever. And we'll deal with that when the time comes. But for now, stay safe. Don't get caught up in all of this. And, don't hesitate to leave a comment, share, like, subscribe, and talk to you in the next video.